The worn rubber soles of Leo King's boots made no sound on the polished marble floor. He moved with an unhurried economy, his broad shoulders swaying in a rhythm honed by years of quiet labor. The handle of his mop was smooth and familiar in his calloused hands, a simple tool for a simple job. In the immense, sterile lobby of Vance Tower, under the cold, silent glow of recessed lighting, he was a ghost in a gray jumpsuit, a necessary but invisible function. He was not sad. He was steady. He was a rock against which the tides of a different world broke and receded every day. In a quiet corner, tucked behind a monolithic chrome planter, sat his world. Maya, all of 6 years old, was a splash of vibrant color in the monochromatic expanse. Her pink coat was draped over a chair, and she was bent over a piece of paper with fierce concentration, her tongue peeking from the corner of her mouth. A constellation of crayons lay scattered around her on the floor. The sitter had cancelled, a fever, an apology, and Leo's choice, as always, was no choice at all. Maya came with him. She was the anchor and the sail of his life. He could endure the quiet judgment of men in tailored suits because her small hand fit so perfectly in his. The glass doors hissed open, slicing through the cathedral-like silence. A storm blew in, wearing a charcoal gray suit and razor-sharp heels that clicked against the marble with the sound of a ticking clock counting down to a detonation. Eleanor Vance, CEO and architect of the steel and glass empire that bore her name, did not walk. She advanced. She held a phone to her ear like a weapon. "No, Marcus, not we'll see, we'll fix it," she said, her voice a shard of ice. It didn't echo. It seemed to be absorbed by the sheer, cold volume of the space. "I don't pay you for excuses. I pay for results. Get them." She disconnected the call with a vicious jab of her thumb, her face a mask of unflinching control. But the anger, having nowhere else to go, radiated from her. It was a palpable force, a drop in atmospheric pressure. The sharp, clipped sound of her voice, so alien in Maya's quiet corner, was like a stone thrown into a still pond. Maya startled, her small body jolting. A red crayon flew from her fingers, and a choked, terrified sob escaped her lips. It wasn't a tantrum. It was the sound of a delicate circuit being overloaded. Her shoulders began to shake, tears welling in her large, dark eyes. Leo was moving before the second sob could form. He didn't rush. His every action was deliberate, a slow-motion counter-melody to Eleanor's frantic energy. He set his mop against the wall, its purpose fulfilled and forgotten. He knelt before his daughter, his large frame creating a shield between her and the cavernous room. He didn't speak. He didn't look toward the source of the disturbance. His universe had contracted to the 2 feet of marble between him and his weeping child. His hand, large and marked with the small scars of a working life, gently picked 2 yellow crayons from the floor. He turned them in his fingers, then, looking directly into Maya's eyes, he began to tap them on the gleaming floor. It was not a random noise. It was a rhythm. Soft, complex, syncopated. Tap-tap-pa-tap. Tup-pa-tap-tap. It was a quiet, insistent heartbeat. A code. It spoke a language older than words, a message of safety and order in the midst of chaos. Maya's sobs hitched. Her tear-filled gaze locked onto the dancing crayons. The rhythm was a gentle hand, stroking the frayed edges of her panic, smoothing them out. A small, watery smile trembled on her lips. She reached out a tentative finger and tapped the floor in time with his beat. The storm inside her was passing. Eleanor Vance had turned to leave, her fury already shifting to the next item on her agenda, when the quiet rhythm reached her. She stopped. She turned back. She saw the big man in the gray jumpsuit, the weeping child, and the strange, gentle ritual with the yellow crayons. She watched from the mezzanine of her own awareness, unseen. She watched him solve a problem not with force, not with negotiation, not with a command, but with a quiet act of grace. He had met an emotional crisis with an intuitive act of beauty. He had created harmony out of distress. A feeling she could not name lodged itself in her throat. Her hand, of its own accord, rose to her mouth. The perfectly manicured fortress of her composure was breached. This was not a power she recognized. It wasn't leverage or capital or market share. It was something real. She was not impressed. She was fundamentally shaken. Her heels made a soft, hesitant sound as she walked toward them, the sharp click of her authority now muted by a profound and unnerving curiosity. She stopped a few feet away. Leo looked up, his expression calm, his eyes holding no trace of accusation, only a deep, unwavering stillness. Eleanor cleared her throat, her voice losing its icy edge for the first time. "What was that?" she asked, the words feeling clumsy and inadequate. "The rhythm." Leo slowly got to his feet, placing a gentle hand on Maya's head. He looked at this powerful woman, a titan of industry in her own lobby, and saw only the question in her eyes. He was not a man driven by ambition. He was a man driven by love. "Just a little game," he said, his voice a low, soft rumble. Eleanor's gaze flickered from his steady eyes to the grand, silent lobby. An idea, illogical and impulsive, formed. "There is a piano," she said, almost to herself, "on the 44th floor. It's been neglected. The acoustics in that room are sensitive." She looked back at him, her corporate authority clashing with a raw, new vulnerability. "I need someone with an ear for harmony to look at it. To see if the space is the problem." It was a preposterous offer, a transparent excuse. He was a janitor. But she wasn't asking a janitor. She was asking the man who had just composed a symphony on the floor with 2 yellow crayons. The 44th floor was a world of muted grays, brushed steel, and glass walls that offered a god's eye view of the city. It was silent, sterile, and smelled faintly of expensive, unscented cleaning products. Leo's new job was officially facilities consultant, a title so vague it was meaningless. He was given a uniform of a simple black polo shirt and charcoal slacks. It was a promotion in name, but his work remained the same. He saw what was broken and fixed it. His presence was a quiet anomaly. He moved through the executive wing with the same steady grace he had in the lobby, his toolbox a far cry from the sleek leather briefcases of the vice presidents. He fixed the incessant, almost subliminal squeak of Eleanor's office door, a sound she had lived with for 2 years. He adjusted the finicky thermostat in the boardroom that always left one side of the table freezing. He did not ask for praise. He simply saw a dissonance and restored the balance. Marcus Sterling, Senior VP of Acquisitions and the man Eleanor had eviscerated on the phone, watched Leo with unconcealed disdain. Sterling was a man polished to a high sheen, from his gelled hair to his Italian shoes. He saw the world as a ladder, and he couldn't comprehend why the CEO had plucked a janitor from the lobby and placed him on the executive rung, even if it was the very bottom. "Making sure the boss's chair swivels just right?" Sterling smirked one afternoon, finding Leo oiling the mechanism on Eleanor's empty chair. Leo didn't rise to the bait. He simply wiped his hands on a rag and looked at Sterling with his calm, unreadable eyes. "A balanced chair helps with a balanced mind," he said softly, before turning and walking away. The simplicity of the statement left Sterling feeling strangely small, as if he tried to start a fistfight with a monk. Eleanor observed it all. She saw the small, respectful nods Leo received from the administrative assistants. She saw the way he'd stopped to help someone carry a heavy box of paper. She saw the contempt in Sterling's eyes. Most of all, she saw Leo's quiet, unwavering integrity. He was like a tuning fork in a room of clashing instruments, his presence subtly encouraging a quieter, more harmonious frequency. Her intrigue deepened. He wasn't just a curiosity. He was a puzzle she felt an urgent need to solve. The city was a grid of glittering diamonds against black velvet far below. It was past 10, and the 44th floor was deserted, a hollow testament to a day's finished commerce. Eleanor sat at her desk, the blue light of her monitor painting her face in a cold, artificial glow. A multi-billion-dollar merger hung in the balance, and she was wrestling with clauses and consequences. Then she heard it. Faint, at first. A whisper of sound weaving through the oppressive silence. It was music. Not the canned, soulless jazz piped into the elevators, but something alive. It was delicate, melancholic, and deeply, achingly beautiful. She rose from her chair, her bare feet silent on the plush carpet. She followed the sound down the hallway, past the dark, empty offices, toward the executive lounge, a room she rarely used, furnished with expensive but uncomfortable designer chairs and a single, magnificent piece, a black grand piano. The door was slightly ajar. Through the gap she saw him. Leo. He was sitting at the piano, his broad back to the door. He thought he was alone. His posture was different from the man who pushed a mop or tightened a screw. Here, he was not serving. He was communing. His fingers, which she had only seen holding tools or his daughter's hand, moved over the ivory keys with a familiarity that spoke of a lifetime of devotion. He wasn't playing a specific famous piece. It was an improvisation, a stream of consciousness rendered in chords and melody. It spoke of sorrow and resilience, of a love lost but not forgotten. It was the sound of his soul. Eleanor stood in the darkness of the hallway, a hand pressed to her chest. This was the glimpse she had been searching for, the answer to the riddle of the yellow crayons. The quiet competence, the gentle spirit, it all stemmed from this. He wasn't a janitor with a knack for rhythms. He was an artist, a virtuoso, hiding in plain sight. The music was a confession, a private revelation of the vast, beautiful world he carried inside him. She felt like an intruder, a witness to something sacred. And in that moment, the sterile fortress of her world was irrevocably breached by a wave of pure, unvarnished beauty. Eleanor did something she had never done before. She invented a reason to bring a child to the office. Bring your child to work day, hastily announced and poorly attended by the childless workaholics on her floor, but it served its purpose. Maya arrived, clutching a worn teddy bear, her eyes wide with the wonder of a world so high in the sky. While Leo was dispatched on a manufactured errand to the building's sub-basement, Eleanor knelt down to speak to Maya in the lounge, feeling a profound and unfamiliar awkwardness. "It's a nice view, isn't it?" Eleanor said, gesturing to the sprawling cityscape. Maya didn't look at the window. She looked at Eleanor. She studied the CEO's face with an unnerving intensity. "You have sad eyes," she said, a simple, profound truth that landed with more force than any corporate takedown Eleanor had ever endured. It was a truth bomb, delivered without malice. Eleanor was speechless. No one had ever said anything so direct, so true, to her. People told her she was brilliant, ruthless, intimidating. No one had ever seen the sadness. Maya seemed to sense she had caused a fissure. She reached into the small backpack she wore and pulled out a folded piece of paper. It was a drawing, rendered in the bold, confident lines of a 6-year-old. She held it out to Eleanor. It was a picture of 3 figures. A tall man with a kind smile. A small girl in a pink coat. And a woman with long, dark hair, not in a suit, but in a simple yellow dress. They were standing in a field of crudely drawn flowers, under a massive, smiling sun. They were all holding hands. Eleanor took the drawing. Her fingers trembled slightly. The woman in the drawing was her. She knew it instantly. It wasn't how she looked, it was how this child saw her. Not as a queen in a glass tower, but as part of a family, bathed in sunlight. A simple, profound gift. For the first time since her own childhood had been stamped out by the demands of her father, Eleanor Vance felt truly seen. Not for her power or her intellect, but for a potential for happiness she had long ago written off as a liability. She clutched the drawing as if it were a stock certificate worth more than her entire company. Later that week, the rain came. It was a torrential, weeping storm, the sky a bruised purple, lashing against the windows of the 44th floor. It mirrored the tempest inside Eleanor. The drawing was tucked safely in her desk drawer, but its image was burned into her mind. The merger had hit a snag. The day had been a brutal series of negotiations and veiled threats. Exhausted, she found herself walking toward the lounge, drawn by an invisible thread. Leo was there, not at the piano, but standing by the vast window, watching the rain carve paths down the glass. A storm can be cleansing, he said without turning around. He had sensed her presence. Or it can be destructive, she countered, her voice weary. She stood beside him, the two of them watching the city drown in the downpour. The setting was intimate, isolated from the corporate world below. You play beautifully, she said, the words finally breaking free. That night, I heard you. He turned to her then, his expression not of surprise, but of quiet resignation. He nodded slowly. It was my wife's. The music. And there, with the rain as their witness, the vulnerability exchange began. The words were sparse, separated by long pauses, filled by the drumming of the storm. Her name was Sarah, he said, his voice a low whisper. She loved the rain. She said it was the world's piano. He told her everything. Juilliard. The promise of a career on the world's great stages. The sudden diagnosis. The hospital rooms that became their world. The way her hand felt in his when she slipped away. I had a choice, he confessed, his gaze distant. A concert tour that was already booked, or Maya. It wasn't a choice. This was his core wound, laid bare, a grief so profound it had led him to this quiet, hidden life, a self-imposed exile from his own genius as a necessary act of love. The raw, unadorned honesty of his story disarmed Eleanor completely. Her own defenses, so carefully constructed over a lifetime, crumbled. My father, she began, the words tasting strange in her mouth. He never told me he loved me. Not once. He gave me stock options for my 18th birthday. He said love was a distraction from ambition. She told him about the profound betrayal that had taught her vulnerability was a weapon others would use against you. He taught me that a fortress was the only safe place to live. I'm just now realizing how lonely it is inside. In the quiet of the storm-lashed room, they were no longer a CEO and a handyman. They were two souls, sharing the stories of their scars, finding a common language in their pain. They had transitioned from colleagues to something infinitely deeper, something that felt terrifyingly like hope. The attack, when it came, was not aimed at Vance Enterprises. It was aimed at the heart of their nascent world. Marcus Sterling, fueled by jealousy and a venomous sense of being overlooked, saw the quiet bond between Eleanor and Leo as a direct threat. Unable to find any professional failing in Leo's work, he decided to attack the foundation of Leo's entire existence, his fatherhood. The anonymous call to Child Protective Services was a masterpiece of cruel insinuation. It painted a picture of a struggling, low-wage worker dragging his young daughter to his late-night job in a potentially unsafe environment. It questioned his stability, his fitness, his choices. It was a primal threat, designed to shatter Leo's world. The arrival of the CPS caseworker, a tired-looking woman with a gentle face but probing eyes, felt like a judgment from on high. Leo's blood ran cold. He had built his entire life around protecting Maya, and now that very life was being used as a weapon against him. He sat in a small, windowless meeting room that Eleanor's assistant had arranged, his hands clasped so tightly his knuckles were white. The thought of losing Maya, even the suggestion of it, was a physical agony. This was the moment of truth for Eleanor. Her board, getting wind of a potential scandal through Sterling's carefully planted rumors, was panicked. The optics were terrible. A CEO, a janitor, a child, an investigation. It was messy. It was human. It was everything her corporate world was designed to avoid. The safe move was to cut him loose, to protect the company's pristine, sterile image. To retreat back into her fortress. But the woman who clutched a child's drawing in her desk drawer was no longer the same woman who had stormed through the lobby a few weeks ago. She made her choice. Eleanor canceled a call with her Tokyo investors. She told her assistant to hold all her appointments. She walked down the hallway to the small meeting room, her heels clicking with a renewed, defiant purpose. She opened the door without knocking. Leo looked up, his face a mask of quiet terror. The caseworker looked up, surprised. I'm Eleanor Vance, she said, her voice calm and filled with an authority that had nothing to do with her title. I believe you wanted to ask some questions about Mr. King's character. She did not save him. She stood with him. She sat down at the table, a queen descending from her tower not to issue edicts, but to join the fray. She looked the caseworker in the eye and began to speak. She talked about Leo's dignity, his quiet competence. She described the incident with the crayons, the way he had soothed a crying child with grace and intuition. She brought up his impeccable work record, the respect he commanded from his colleagues. "Mr. King is raising an exceptional child," Eleanor stated, her voice unwavering. "Because he is an exceptional man. The reason Maya was with him at work that evening was because her sitter was ill, and he, like any devoted parent, made a sacrifice to ensure his daughter was safe and cared for. This company, my company," she said, her words a direct challenge to her board, her past, her father's ghosts, "is proud to support him and his daughter in any way we can. My lawyers are at his disposal, though I doubt they will be needed." She placed her hand on the table, a few inches from Leo's. It was not a touch, but it was a connection. A public declaration of allegiance. In that sterile room, under the hum of fluorescent lights, they became a unified team. He was no longer a man alone against the world. He had an ally. And she had found something worth fighting for that had no stock symbol. The CPS investigation was closed, but Sterling, like a cornered animal, grew more vicious. He leaked a carefully twisted version of the story to a notorious business gossip blog. The headline was salacious. "Vance CEO's bizarre charity case. Is the Queen of Corporate America losing her mind?" The article painted Eleanor as an unhinged predator and Leo as a bumbling, incompetent janitor she was toying with for sport. The public vindication came at the company's annual Vision Gala, a lavish affair for investors, press, and the city's elite. The board had given Eleanor an ultimatum: fire Leo and issue a formal apology, or they would begin proceedings to remove her. The air in the grand ballroom was thick with tension and whispered speculation. Eleanor walked onto the stage, a solitary figure in a stunning but severe black gown. She looked out at the sea of faces, her own board members staring at her with cold expectation. She took a deep breath at the podium, the teleprompter glowing with the safe, corporate speech her team had prepared. She ignored it. "Good evening," she began, her voice ringing with clarity. "Tonight we are here to talk about vision. For years I believed vision meant seeing the path to greater profit, to market dominance. I have come to believe I was wrong." A murmur went through the crowd. "Vision is not about seeing what you can gain. It's about seeing what is truly valuable. It's about seeing the quality of a person's character." She paused, her gaze sweeping the room until it found Marcus Sterling, who was standing near the front, a smug look on his face. "There are rumors that my judgment has been compromised. That I have shown favor to an employee of this company. That is true." The room fell silent. "I have been accused of elevating a man who, as one of my senior executives put it, has nothing to offer. I would like to introduce you to that man now. Leo King, would you please join me on stage?" Leo, who had been standing in the wings at her request, walked into the spotlight. He looked overwhelmed but resolute. Eleanor turned to the audience. "My executive team found proof that the call to CPS and the subsequent leak to the press originated from a single, malicious source, a man who saw integrity not as a virtue, but as a threat to his own ambition." She looked directly at Sterling. "Marcus, your position at Vance Enterprises is terminated, effective immediately." Gasps rippled through the ballroom. Sterling's face went white. Eleanor wasn't finished. She turned to Leo. On the stage was the same grand piano from the 44th floor lounge. "They say a person's soul is in their art," she said, her voice softening. "Leo, would you do me the honor?" He hesitated, this world of spotlights and judgments so foreign to him. She gave him a look of absolute, unshakable trust. He walked to the piano and sat down. He took a moment, closed his eyes, and then his hands touched the keys. He did not play the quiet, improvisational melodies she had overheard. He played Chopin. The Nocturne in C-sharp minor. It was a piece that demanded not just technical mastery, but a profound depth of soul. The music flooded the ballroom, a torrent of passion, grief, and breathtaking beauty. It was an undeniable testament to the genius he held within. It silenced the whispers, the judgment, the speculation. It was the truth, in its purest form. When the final, haunting note faded into silence, the room was still for a heartbeat before erupting into thunderous applause. Eleanor walked over to the piano. In front of the entire world, her investors, her employees, and the press, she laid her hand gently on his shoulder. It was a simple gesture, a public solidification of their unity, an acknowledgement that his worth was greater than all the fortunes in that room combined. The last of the guests had departed, leaving the grand ballroom in a state of quiet disarray. The adrenaline of the evening had faded, replaced by a peaceful, humming silence. Leo and Eleanor stood alone near the stage, the grand piano a silent witness between them. The air was thick with everything that had been said, and everything that hadn't. "You didn't have to do that," Leo said, his voice quiet, almost hoarse. He was still trying to process the tectonic shift that had just occurred in his life. "Yes," Eleanor replied, turning to face him fully. Her gaze was soft, the last remnants of her icy armor melted away. "I did." She took a step closer, closing the small space between them. The cavernous ballroom seemed to shrink until it contained only the two of them. All the external threats were gone, the battles won. All that was left was the truth that had been building between them since the first tap of a yellow crayon on a marble floor. She reached up and gently touched his cheek, her thumb stroking the line of his jaw. He leaned into her touch, his eyes closing for a brief moment. He placed his hand over hers, holding it against his face. "Eleanor," he whispered, her name a prayer on his lips. She didn't need any more words. She leaned in and kissed him. It was not a kiss of fiery passion or desperate relief. It was a kiss of arrival. It was gentle, deep, and certain, a confirmation of a bond forged in silent observation, shared vulnerability, and mutual respect. It was the peaceful, cathartic resolution to the discordant notes of their pasts. In the quiet of the empty hall, they had finally found their harmony. 18 months later. The morning sunlight, warm and golden, streamed into a kitchen that smelled of coffee and cinnamon. It wasn't a sterile penthouse apartment, but a comfortable house with a small, thriving garden visible through the French doors. Leo, wearing a faded t-shirt, was at the stove, flipping pancakes with a practiced ease. Maya, now a confident 7-year-old, was carefully setting the table, her tongue once again peeking out in concentration. On a cluttered, comfortable sofa in the adjoining living room, Eleanor sat with her legs tucked under her. She was wearing soft sweatpants and one of Leo's old Juilliard sweatshirts. The CEO who once commanded boardrooms was now deeply engrossed in reading a storybook aloud, her voice animated and full of warmth. The tableau was one of happy, domestic normalcy, a world away from the gleaming marble and hollow silence where they had first met. That afternoon, they stood together on a different kind of stage. It was the grand opening of the Sarah King Music Foundation, a beautifully renovated community center dedicated to providing free, high-level music education to underprivileged children. It was their joint mission, the thematic resolution of their individual wounds. His sacrificed career was reborn as a philanthropic gift, his talent now a source of hope for hundreds. Her wealth and power, once tools of control, were now instruments of care and creation. Later that evening, back in the quiet of their home, Eleanor found Leo at the upright piano in their living room. He was playing softly, a gentle melody that seemed to be pulled from the peaceful evening air. She came up behind him and rested her head on his shoulder, wrapping her arms around him. He leaned into her embrace, his fingers stilling on the keys. "I never thought this was possible," he said, his voice thick with an emotion that still felt new. "This life. This peace." She kissed his temple, breathing in the simple, profound contentment of the moment. She looked from his face to the family photos on the mantelpiece, to Maya's latest drawing taped to the refrigerator. Her fortress was gone, replaced by a home. "True harmony always is," she whispered. "You just have to be willing to listen." "Where are you watching from?" "From a bustling city or a quiet town, we hope this story found you well. If this story touched your heart, Please like and subscribe for more tales of love, hope, and connection. We read every comment and cherish the community we are building together. Thank you for spending your time with us. Until next time, stay kind, stay hopeful, and never stop listening to the music of the human heart.